be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I have with me a very special guest, Dr. Bhrett McCabe. He is a former collegiate baseball player, two-time national champion with LSU, author of Break Free from Suckville and the Mindside Manifesto. He now works as a clinical sports psychologist with the PGA, as well as a number of different athletes and sports organizations, but has spent a lot of time around winning and championship cultures. So today we're going to pick his brain a little bit about what it takes to unlock your inner greatness. So thank you, Dr. McCabe, for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So recently I heard you talk on another podcast about your favorite baseball movies of all time. So I want to start today with a little bit of shift. Since I know you work with the PGA, what's your favorite golf movie?
I know everybody would probably say like Tin Cup or something, but there was a movie back in the day with HBO. I don't know if it was a movie or a series called Dead Solid Perfect, which I loved. I think it was Randy Quaid and a couple other folks. It was kind of like just the trials and tribulations of a tour player. But when you take a look at like Tin Cup is the perfect partner to Bull Durham. Both led by Kevin Costner. I think Bull Durham to me is the quintessential movie of somebody who's trying to perform. I mean, Tin Cup did that. I think Dead Solid Perfect did that. I've never been a movie guy that comes to the magic of sports. I was never one of Golf's Greatest Game or those perfect feels, Legend of Bagger Vance or anything like that. I was more along the lines of what it really is. I think we sell a lot of beauty of the games, but in the essence of it, but in reality, it's dirty and ugly and messy. And so I think that's probably what more than anything is I tend to come back to all the time.
Yeah, no, I find myself being drawn into the players that struggle with finding themselves, with balancing the adversity and the day-to-day grind of what it takes to be a professional. Because I think that's one of the big things that as we're all trying to pursue greatness and excellence, we get lost in the fact that it's okay that today's not a great day. You can still make progress. You can still get better. You can still move forward. You don't have to feel good all the time.
Well, the general of life, right, of any kind of thing follows the hero journey. And the hero journey is pretty much what every great movie has been written about, where it's an individual out there who's got an uncovered potential. It's untapped, and there's a conflict, and a mentor comes into their life, and that mentor helps them realize who they are, and then they go out and then they're challenged again, where they have to trust it to save the world, and then it starts all over again. And so I think that's very similar to what we go through in all sports or any kind of performance. Is we get to a certain level in our performance and whatever we do based on our talents and our skills, but it really doesn't take a whole lot of I would say effort or introspection or development until we struggle a little bit, and at which time then we have to kind of find out who we are. And usually there's a mentor that comes into our lives that helps us maybe a series of mentors, it may be a series of books that we've read, that we've got on our self-discovery, that we find what we're capable of doing. And once those things kind of tap in, then we become very effective at managing and facing challenges. I was just on the phone with one of my elite professional athletes, and we're having this conversation. As I said, is there anything that you have in your life that you can't face? And, it's kind of it's a simple question, but it's one that always stops people, because there's always like, oh no, But I'm like, really think about it. Is there anything in your life, anything in your performance, anything in your challenge that you couldn't stand up to and face? Like, you couldn't find a way to work through? Because regardless of what the challenge is in front of you, if you really take a step back and look at how to break it down and get refocused and reset, you can still chop away at it. And once we realize that, it's just like the hero's journey. It's just like the movies you like, they're all the same. I mean, that's what we have to do in our life.
Yeah, no, I love that. And speaking of challenges, when you look back on your playing time at LSU, what's the most challenging moment that you faced as a player there?
Well, I think it was an ongoing problem, which was believing in myself. I didn't have a high school career where, I was the superstar kid. I played 1 year varsity because I got held back to play junior varsity for 2 years. I was always the third or fourth pitcher on the team. I was a late grower. I grew very late. I've matured very late. Probably should have been held back, and so forth. But it took me 3 or 4 years. It was actually the first time I kind of tapped into some belief happened after my sophomore year. I had been sick with mono, spent a ton of time in the gym, and all of a sudden is when like the work in the gym started showing up. There's a point in kids' lives where, like the testosterone hits and all the other stuff, and all of a sudden you start seeing the changes and you start feeling the changes. And that happened. But then I got hurt. And when I got hurt, I lost that whole mojo. I lost that confidence. And so that cycle started, and it took another year for me to really get to a point of being at absolute rock bottom, to believe in myself. And I was thankful enough I had a coach who was willing to challenge me in a very uncomfortable way, but challenging in a way I needed. And I think in the moment I didn't like it. So when I finally realized what that was, and what I needed to do, which was get dialed into myself and get dialed into the importance of what I needed to approach every time, despite the fact of not having the quote ability anymore. I had lost the raw ability. But once I got back to, once I found that I could believe in myself and then go out there and compete, it didn't matter. A lot of the other factors of life didn't matter as much, because all I wanted to do was to compete, and I didn't care what it had to be. I just wanted to get it done.
So I'm not a big, obviously I don't think we should live in the past, but I also think we should learn from the past. So
sure.
When you look back and you think about what you know now, would you have approached some of that situation a little differently? What would be the advice for somebody who's struggling with confidence today, kind of in a similar boat as you? They have some ability, they know they can play, but at times they get out there and they go, I don't belong. This isn't my place. Or whatever it may be. How do we attack that?
I think it's, would I have gone back to do it differently? Yes. When I injured my shoulder, I would have gone into treatment. I would have gone into a physical therapist. I would have spent a little bit more time in the rehabilitative standpoint versus just relaxing and taking time off and hoping it'd go away. I think I was a little passive into the idea that I didn't want to ripple the success that I had, which resulted in me destroying what I had. I think you're right. When we take a look back at what we've done, our experiences and our learning should look like our bookshelf. Our bookshelf should have different sections. It should have ones about who we are, what we've done, the things that, the mentors that we've been around, some of those things, and the people we've learned from. Would I have gone back to do it differently? I would say, knowing where I sit today, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for that. I was not a psychology guy. I was not going to go into grad school. I was either going to go to law school or medical school. When I entered school, I'd kind of move more towards the law side because I didn't want to do the work to go to med school. But that all being said, there's no way in hell I'd be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't gotten injured and had to fight back. So now, if I was coaching somebody like me and didn't know the end answer, I would say, stop trying to recreate what you have. Let's create a better version of you today. Let's focus on the things that you've got and what you're capable of doing. Just because you're injured doesn't mean anything. It's not predicting anything. It doesn't mean you lost anything. Let's take where you sit today and let's go forward. I'd probably also have worked a little bit harder in when I lost my when I got injured, I also kind of lost my confidence in the gym. And so I kind of avoided it because I'd done all that work and it was gone. So I'd probably have gotten back in there. But I think it's the contribution of what we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, because I had a similar experience. I was doing really well in school playing ball. It didn't continue on that same trajectory, partly because I stopped putting in the same work and partly because the circumstances changed for me. And I always look back and I go, okay, if I was in those shoes again, I wouldn't change what I've done because I like where I'm at and I'm really happy with what I'm doing. But if somebody else finds themselves there, I think that, like you said, we have to be able to learn from those moments to apply them to help others going forward. And I think that's the big thing.
Well, I think the overall thing is that we as competitors have to understand that we have our own psychological fingerprint. We don't know what it is. We can't put it in the ground and say, okay, that's what it is. But psychologically, we have our own way of viewing things. And you watch people grow and mature. And some of them are influenced by the people they're around and some of the experiences they're around. You can see them become this different individual, right? We try to conform so much. We try to get people in the right frame of mind. We try to get people to do it the right way. We try to, all these things that are actually more devastating than saying, who are you and let's go. And, you know, if we were to put on music and say, dance to the music you hear, people would dance freely if there was no judgment. We weren't making fun of them. But the truth of the matter is there would be some people who would interpret the music the way they wanted to. We have to do the same thing. We try to conform to the average for so many people but yet when we look at life, we see the outliers all the time. The greatness of what lies in people is not in conformity, but in understanding who you are and how you interact with the world around you. That is what makes us unique and special. What we have to do is appreciate the fact that we are unique and special and that our experiences help define who we are. And it's ever changing, right? I think people go through 7-year cycles that over every 7 years, we kind of redefine who we are. And if you take a look at your life, you can see that, like, you'll emerge into something new, or you'll change, or a job change, or a role change. Your kids got older, and you've, who my wife and I are today, 27 years since we've been married, is a lot different than we first got married. And so our relationship's a lot different. And so it's those things of understanding who we are and how we express it. I think we have to learn and be understanding of who we are, understanding of what makes us tick. Why are we feeling the way we're feeling? That's the greatest gift that we can get through the experiences we have.
So with that being said, I think that's absolutely fantastic. But when we look at today's sports environment and today's culture and the amount of coaching and just data-driven stuff, specific positionings and different things, and everyone's trying to be the same, how do we allow for that freedom of individuality in growth within those confinements? Because everyone's trying to, I guess, I don't know. I see these coaches push everybody to try to look and feel and do the same thing as these pros, but we're not all the same. We don't move the same. We don't act the same. We don't see the world the same. So where do we go to help create that individuality to grow into what we're capable of?
Well, I think some of it from a coaching stance. I mean, I'm not saying that coaches are doing it wrong. They have the toughest job going today because the game is so different and people are different. And people aren't bad. They're not wrong. They're not anything. They're just different. And so they are trying to get the collective average of everybody to be at a higher level for all of us, right? And, when I look at what we need to do as a coach, I could say, give everybody the opportunity to do what they want to do. Okay. But the problem with that is that doesn't exist. And that doesn't exist because we've got to have some layers of structure. So maybe we want to allow the 15% of individuality to be there. And so, I could say, I could say, we also have to be very disciplined. I'm all about discipline. I grew up with a dad who's in the military. And I understand the power of discipline. We can still be disciplined and be individual. Some of the most individualist people that I've ever been around that are unique are really disciplined in the things that they do. So we have to abandon the idea or flush the idea that we're thinking, hey, being unique and different means that you're being undisciplined. No, not at all. It's what makes you tick. How do you see the game? How do you see, I've got clients who are very regimented in everything they do. And when they get into the heat of the moment, they follow that same style and system, works perfectly for them. And I've got others that need to be very creative, that the more regimented they are in the competitive ring, the worse they are. We need to allow ourselves to find out who we are. And it's not the fact of saying, okay, what works? Oh, that's it. It's a lot of times that wisdom comes from journaling and taking a look back over a period of time and going, you know what? That's pretty interesting. I find that I really like this. And being able to go to a coach and have that conversation of, hey, coach, when we look at my mechanics or we look at my golf swing or we look at my shootings, on video, this is what I'm looking at. I don't like to break down my mechanics because that's important, but I'm looking at more the rhythm, or there's one thing I'm really looking at. We got to be willing to say those things and know who we are. And I think as a coach, we absolutely want somebody to tell us that, because if not, then what happens is we're sitting in a situation where people are, I would say maybe not being, they're not being authentic or what we need them to be, right? We want people to say, this is what makes me tick. This is what gets me excited. Ultimately, at the end of the day, those are the things that I would say that gives us the most return on our investment as a coach, is that when somebody is willing to sit there and say, hey, the things that we're doing, the process that we're going about it, all these other things, this is what we're jamming with. Oh, okay, cool. Got it. Like, I know who we are. Like when we all go to order a cheeseburger or a hamburger at a restaurant, we all order it different ways. Some people put, honey mustard on it. Some people like onions. Some people like pickles. When I was a kid, I hated pickles. Now I love pickles. So we change, and it's okay. And so that's usually a skill that I'll do with, or a drill I'll do with coaches, to say, let's go get a hamburger and let them build it however they want to. And you'll see everybody has a different expression of who they are. Now, I'm not doing psychotherapy based on what they put on their cheeseburger, but what I am saying is see how they make individual choices about what they like.
I like that. Because when you said that, I started thinking about my wife, and I could order for her right now. It's ketchup, mustard, and onion on a hamburger. And that's right. Just how she is. And that's the order she says it in. It's always the same. Yep. But that's her individual way of doing it. And I'm a cheeseburger plain guy. That's just how I like it. And we're all going to have that same, now we get to experience the cheeseburger or hamburger together, but we're doing it in our own unique way. And I like that structure within the freedom to build it how we want. I think that's unique and special. So I've heard you say a couple times through some interviews that I heard in the past, competing with an A, a B, and a C game. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Yeah. So, one of the ultimate skills as a mentally, right, is that we have to tap into what we have each day. We're never going to have 100% of what we have. So if we were to think about two concepts first, on one side, we have our capabilities. All right. And those capabilities are things that we train for. That's our training, our skills, our development, our ability to function in the sport. That's, if you've got the skills and the talent, that ball of energy, let's say, is really big. And if we were to compare those two side by side to another player, we'd probably say the person with the biggest ball of energy is going to win versus somebody who's not. But that's not what works, because there are a lot of super talented people who just don't get it done under the heat of the moment. And so when you cross that white line into competition, you don't bring 100% of that with you. You may never get to employ some of that. You may have certain things that are really challenging. You may have things that are demanding against you. You may have a bad umpire. It may be cold. You may wake up and you feel like you've got a head cold. You may feel more powerful than you've ever felt. So you always have, quote, a percentage of what you have, but we don't know what that percentage is. And I wish we could scan ourselves and say, today, Brett, you have 74% of your abilities. Well, most athletes are going to be chasing the 26% that's missing versus saying, well, wait a minute. If I've got the biggest ball of energy, my 74% may be bigger than your 85%. So let me focus on the 75% I have. Well, if we were to break that down, there are days that we have our A game. And those days that we have our A game, it's really easy. Well, theoretically, we feel really good. We feel really powerful. We like what we're doing. It's simple. If I was to look at golf or baseball pitching or, shooting a basketball, the ball's coming out of our hand or off the club really well. We feel balanced and in control, blah, blah, blah. But those days don't always mean we're going to have great success, because a lot of times what happens is our expectations get out of control. We try too hard. We get too expansive. We push because we know we've got it. We got to take advantage of those days. On the flip side, you have your B game, or on the other side, you have your B game. And your B game is usually where you play most of the time. It's where it's not 100% great. You have what you have. It may not feel wonderful, but you're able to play with it and it's okay. So, it may be as a pitcher, I don't have total command of my fastball. As a golfer, I may be hitting it a little chunky, or I just don't feel great over the ball. As a quarterback, I'm having a hard time reading the defense a little bit, but that's just normal. That's the normal ebb and flow. And then we also have our C game. Now we also have our D and an F. And our DNF, we just got to flush, because some days we're the windshield and some days we're the bug, right? Some days it's just, doesn't matter what I do. I'm going to spill coffee down the front of my shirt and I just got to deal with today's a harder day. The C game is where a lot of people take that 20%, 26% that's missing. And what they normally do is they literally try to solve the puzzle. They try to find it and fix it and get over it. But what happens is some days our C game, our capacity, which is that number, that capacity may be around 50%. I don't know why. Don't know why we got out there and all of a sudden the rhythm of life changed and we started struggling. Okay, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We can't go out there chasing what we don't have. Sometimes with our C game, we got to say, you know what? I've got my C game. I'm going to downshift to third gear and we're going to drive our four-wheel drive today. It's not personal. But what happens is our psyche, our ego doesn't allow us to do that, because we're like, well, what's it going to be like tomorrow or the next time I compete? Versus saying, hey, it is what it is. And as a pitcher, one of the things that that some days you didn't have great command. As golfers, sometimes people don't have great command of the ball. And they'll go ahead, the good players will go ahead and employ their C game. Like, hey, I ain't got it today. We're just downshifting going into C game and we're going to compete like a son of a gun. That's maximizing what you have, which instead of like, why don't I have this? Let me go on a journey to try to find this and stuff like that.
So you mentioned something interesting there. And when people have their C game, you mentioned that they tend to go, well, what am I going to have tomorrow? Or they start looking to the future. Do you think that is part of the problem for why when we have our C game, like the pros can, like you said, downshift and mentally go, all right, I'm going to go compete, where other people go, how do I get back to my B or my A? And I'm looking to the future to, what did I do different here? Or what did I go, like, why am I there? Do you think that's part of the challenge?
Well, I think a lot of us get to, we have what we have now. And what we do is we're trying to always project to the future. Any competitor is always trying to look at the future to kind of figure out how they're going to handle it, right? And the hard thing with that is we don't know what the future holds. What I'd rather them do is realize, can you face any challenge that you have by employing your process in front of it? Yeah. Then why does it matter? Well, I played like crap today. And I mean, next week I've got it doesn't matter. You're going to wake up those days. You're going to do your work in between. You're going to wake up that day and you're going to show up and do what you got. And once you can relieve people of that future fear, which is where the mind wants to live, because the greatest threat to the human mind is uncertainty. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what it's going to be. And so we start trying to tell a story around it. Well, the only stories we know are the things that we've done or the things that we fear. That's it. We don't tell a rosy picture of, man, I cannot wait. I mean, we're first golf tournament of the year. is in Maui in the Tournament of Champions. I've got handful of players playing in that. So the players who won last year are playing in it. And so my wife and I will go to Maui, and we're taking our adult daughters, and there's an anxiety of making sure that we've got all the COVID stuff squared away, right? We're going to freaking Hawaii. Like, I'm looking at the weather. Like, does it really matter? I mean, where we stay, I don't think the people who work there say we will get less than an inch a year, it seems like. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what they'll say, oh yeah, the clouds will build up. It never rains. Like, does it really matter? Like, I'm going to Hawaii. But the mind will look at that and say, do I have everything ready? I don't want to get there and have a problem. Hey, if I have a problem, I make a phone call. But that's what we do, right? The uncertainty eats us alive on the inside. And by doing that, we start telling every story about the future and ignoring every story about ourselves. Why don't we reflip back into being that person who can face the story in front of us, face the challenge in front of us, and engage that challenge? Like, we're not getting into a boxing ring against somebody who's 5 weight classes higher than us that's going to beat us down. We're facing a difficulty of life, but every aspect of life has a way that we can dance with it. We can work with it. We're not, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I can be nervous before I would pitch in front of Yankee Stadium, right? I could be nervous as hell. And that's fine. That's the body getting ready. But then I need to mentally go, wait a minute, this is good feeling. Well, how are you going to do? You're probably going to suck. Well, maybe I will. But I can go out there on the mound and I can go compete for the first inning and do what I've done my entire life. I'm still going to feel the way I feel. That ain't going anywhere. But I'm okay with it.
So what's a trick that we can do to help us stay present more often? Is there something we can do to allow us to stop the mind wandering? Obviously, it's going to happen, but how do we get back? Because it's once we go there,
I think the big thing, right, is the big challenge that we have to have is, as a player, as anybody, is that the trick is, what am I actually doing right now? I mean, is it really that bad? I mean, think about it. Like, okay, people don't fear failure. There's been a ton of books written on fear of failure. They don't fear failure because every time we failed, we've all gotten back up and gotten back to work. We fear the moment we know we fail. That moment where we know it's over. Like, we know it's like, God, game's over. Like, you can watch any football game and know when all of a sudden it's like the offense has had their last shot. It ain't going to happen. The opponent gets the ball and they're going to choke the time. You know, in a game of baseball, when all of a sudden the pressure breaks. In basketball, when all of a sudden the pressure gets up. Golf, a guy's going to win, right? You can see it. And as a player, when that moment on the other side, when we go, oh, but then we go, most of us will have that moment of, all right, well, let's go. We got to get back to work here. Like, it doesn't take long. So we're not fearing the failure thing. So my whole thing is, let's not fear the worst case scenario. We always get back up. Let's fear that we didn't give 100% of what we have. Like, let's make sure that that never happens. Our current generation, and it doesn't matter age, I mean, it's just generation. I think we're so built on trying to make sure that we're special and that we have what it takes to succeed, that we're terrified to give 100% effort. Because if we fail and give 100% effort, what does that mean? That we're not good enough to get there?
That right there speaks to me so much, because I work with a lot of athletes. I have a gym, so a lot of my days are spent training young athletes. And it's interesting because when we do things that challenge them, a lot of them don't give their best effort because of that. I think that fear of potentially not doing it right and being embarrassed in front of their friends. So they say, well, if I don't give my best, if I don't give it all and I can't get it right, then it's okay.
Yep.
And I think that's an interesting thought because, if you don't give it all, the chances of you succeeding goes way down, and you're never going to become the best version or possible of yourself.
Well, how many times have we tried to correct things versus just taking a step back and going, wait a minute, let's start over. Right? Like sometimes it's better just to admit, God, I got beat. All right, let's get back to work. So let's say we go in the gym. I'll give you a perfect example. So when I was training to play, this was the fall of 1990, we had a strength coach. And this guy was brilliant. And this was at the age when strength coaches, and I'm just going to use the word strength coach as a generic term, but you get my point. This was somebody who, he was doing a lot of plyometrics and the heavy baseballs and the light baseballs back in 1990. So I know a lot of the baseball world has gone into this crazy. I mean, we were doing this 30 years ago and we won the national title, set the home run record that year. And anyway, the guy was brilliant, but he also didn't believe in 1 rep maxes. And that was big back then, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the meatheads would come in from football and was like, I can do a 1 rep. No, he believed in volume rep maxes. And so he was like, that's a sign of endurance and strength. I don't know if it's right. I'm not a physical guy, but it really was good. And the thing that was interesting about him was what we did at the end of the year. And this was my freshman year. And we got together and we were like having a kind of some competitions of rep maxes. And I remember getting on the leg press and I went first in our group and everybody was around and he put up like, I don't know, let's say just 225, whatever on the leg press. I don't even remember what it was. He said, do as many as you can, go. And I remember I got to like 50 or 60. I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, I'm out. Can't do it anymore. The next guy gets up there and he's like, he gets to 30, gets to 50, easily passes 60 and sets the new number at 90. And I was like, dude, I was almost like, let me get back in there. Right. The next guy comes up and does like 150. And what was interesting was they weren't as strong as me. But what the difference was, each person before them reestablished the line to gain. But once they got into the uncertainty, you started buying into those doubts and uncertainties. But before that, it was, oh, I can get to 50, 60. I can beat Brett. That was such a powerful moment for me. Looking back, I didn't realize it in the moment. Doing what I do now and looking back and going, it's really hard to venture into the unknown and really empty the tank. We buy into all the noises. We buy into all the doubts and insecurities when we don't have any reference points. But when we have a reference point that somebody's come before us and laid the groundwork, we can push through it. So about 10 years ago when the CrossFit phase was big, my wife and I were in CrossFit and I loved it. I kicked ass. I didn't compete. I didn't care if my name was on the board, right? But some of it is I didn't care if my name was on the board on days that had things to do with speed and quickness, burpees, and I'm 6'5". Burpees are not built for people who are 6'5", right? You don't see hippopotamuses and giraffes fall down in the prairie and get back up. But when it was strength day and it was squat day and it was power clean day and it was deadlift day, I'd be like, I don't really care if you put my name up there, but I sure as hell did. Because I was in my realm of what I was comfortable with. Now, looking back at it, I should have probably allowed myself to not limit myself in the other and been like, okay, I'm not fast. Never been fast. I'm not a fast runner, but I'm a plotter and I'll get it done. But let me get myself better versus survival and I would hold back. And I look back and I do that all the time in my life. Like I'm one of those people that goes into a gym. I need you to tell me what we're doing today. I can't handle the unknown because I will limit myself. And I talk about in the Mindside Manifesto, but when I first started in this industry, I went to go work with a football team, a 1AA football team. And the strength team was like, we're having a hard time with our fitness level of our players. We're doing the training, but when they get in practice, they're just gassing out. And I was like, well, it's because they're not giving full effort in their training. And they're like, oh yeah, they are. I mean, and they were doing these like after conditioning, they do these 12 rounders, which was 110, 110, 110. They'd walk across the infield of the football field and then they'd do it again. They had to do 12 of them. And I said, okay, what do you think they're doing? You said they have 1 minute and 45 seconds to do each one. Let's say, I think that's what the number was. They're going to come across and hit the next line at 145. They're going to pace themselves on those 12s. and they're going to survive. Never once are they going to empty their tank. And they're going to teach themselves how to regulate, not how to maximize. So I said, you want to take a risk today? And they're like, hell yeah. I mean, we're dying in practice. I said, okay. I said, we're going to go to them and say, you guys get to pick how many you run. We're just going to start. You've got to give 100% on every one of them. And you just have to give me 100% of what you have. I don't care if you don't have it and you say, I'm out. Then we're going to celebrate you because you hit the mark. And it was fascinating. The first guy quit at 3. The team captain, who the coaches knew was weak, but the players loved him, quit at 4. And, claimed to have a back injury. But we knew that was the case, right? Because he couldn't go in that darkness and continue to compete. We knew he was a paper tiger. And it showed it. And the vast majority of players made it to about 8 or 9, and they were gassed. I mean, I'm not a believer in you work out till you puke type of thing. I think that's silly, but they were at that point because it became a challenge. And there was probably walk-ons, but there was a small subset of them that at 12 were like, don't you take me off of this track. And I'm like, okay, well, those are the guys that go through Navy SEAL training, right? Those are the guys, but don't we want those guys? And so I asked them afterwards, I said, all right, guys. And the vast majority of the players, when they tapped out, they were like, God, I had one more in me. Because they get to that point where it's hard, but they realize they do have a little bit left in the tank. But I asked them afterwards, I said, hey, what'd y'all think of this workout? And they're like, hardest workout we've ever done. Because we had to face our own doubts. And one of the guys in the back raised his hand and goes, I've always done what people told me, and I never have to set my own boundaries. That was hard. And I looked at the strength coaches, and that strength coach is now at a major D1 program. And I talked to him all the time. I said, do you still do those types of things? He goes, I do them all the time. Because he said, I get sick and tired of people just accommodating to what they need to do to get by. That's what we do in our life. Yeah. We do just enough to get by. Look, there was a video that was done. There's a great book by Daniel Pink called Drive. And the book, if I'm not knocking him for saying this, watch his TED Talk. It's his whole book. Okay. And it's so succinctly put. But he talks about how they look at, most people would say, if you pay me enough and you give me a big enough bonus, I'll far exceed my abilities. It's not true. And I've seen this managing people in my business. People will work to where they're comfortable and just surge a little bit beyond it. So if they need to make $50,000 a year, they're going to make 55. They're not going to try to make $150,000 a year because the sacrifice it's going to take to get there is more than they're willing to do. So the vast majority of us are willing to just stay in this misery moment of just average and be comfortable with where we are versus pushing beyond what we don't have. Now, there are people who are willing to do it. There are people who are willing to empty the tank and push, and some of those are entrepreneurs, and some of those are people who are image breakers or glass breakers or whatever it is. Very few people are willing to do the little things to get to a spot of absolutely emptying the tank, and then coming back to you, coach, and saying, "I don't know if I hit it."
Is there a way?
I get better.
Is there a way to get us to be more comfortable in the dark?
Realizing what tools we have to face the challenge in the dark.
Okay.
So if we take a look at horror movies, right? Horror movies live their lives based on the music that they play around the potential threat. It's actually not the threat. If you watched a horror movie without the music, it's pretty boring. It's not even funny. I mean, it's not even scary. It's more funny. But you play the music, it primes you. So the dark is a lot of the stuff that's out there, which is priming us to be scared. So how about we just look at it and say, I know what I have to do to face it. I have a process of which to face whatever challenge I'm going through. And I'm okay. It's not that I want to fail. It's not that I have any desire to fail. It's not that anything. It's the fact that I can face it. And I can break it down. My old roommate is a trauma surgeon. And I asked him one day, I said, how do you do that? And he goes, oh, you just have your process when people come through the door. I didn't put them there. that's a pretty good analogy to look at, which is, in other words, I'm not the one that wrapped the car around the tree. I feel bad for him, but my job is to give him the most quality of life back I can. And I got to assess him. And that's what we have to do. In other words, he's saying, I didn't cause the outcome. My job is to give you some of it back. And that's how we need to look at things. We're sitting in the darkness and we're in a really tough environment. Oftentimes what limits or clouds our ability to compete is this aspect of judgment we have in our own mind. We start judging our performance as if it's good enough or what it means about us versus face the challenge and evaluate that later. Like get in the mud, get in the darkness, give it what you got, focus on your process, break it down, analyze what's going on, apply your strengths and get after it. Mm-hmm. Well, we can do that every time.
No, I love that. So I want to shift gears just a little bit here as we start to wind down. I wonder, have you seen the video of the Houston basketball player, Jamel Sheed, following the lost Alabama? What does that video say to you? What do you see when you see somebody doing something like that? What's that make you think?
Well, first thing I see is that my Crimson Tide won that game, and I was excited to see that. And I love the way that Coach Oates coaches and his players play with a extreme amount of competitiveness and energy. But what I saw with that is a kid who obviously gets it. I mean, I think a lot of times our emotions get out of control. I don't want to make a judgment about the coaches and the other ones that were upset leaving. What I do want to focus on is the young man who stood there and cleaned it up. And I'm sure in a way it's kind of showing up his coaching staff. And my one thought is he going to catch a little bit of criticism for that? Now he'll probably be protected in the public eye. That's kind of what I was thinking, was like, man, but he did what was right. And I like that. And I think it's, I think it's a sign of what we need to do. There's also a lot of internet things that are going around about baseball teams and softball teams that leave the locker rooms or their dugouts cleaner than they found them as the visitors. Yes, those are all critical. And we were in Vegas last week, my wife and I, and right now with COVID, I was there to give some talks, and with COVID, the cleaning crew, the housekeeping staff doesn't come into your room as much. So you had to call, and the cleaner came in and she was there, and we were in the room, and she said, "Oh, you don't have to leave. It'll take me about 10 minutes and I'll be ready." And she said, we do X number of rooms a day and we're just hustling. And I said, "What makes it easier for you guys in our room?" And she said, "You know what? You're the first person that's ever asked that." She said, "What's important is that if you take your dirty towels and you put them in the sink, that helps, because I don't have to pick up 10 of them around the room or underneath the sink cabinet and all that. Just put them up in the sink. Put your garbage in the garbage can or near the garbage can, and put the garbage can on the counter. That helps a lot. Keep your clothes all kind of in a certain area so I don't have to walk around them." She said the amount of people who come in and disrespect the room and just throw stuff all over the place, and so I always think about it as, when you take a look at who makes your time in a hotel the most valuable. Sure, it's coming from the culture of the owner or the company or the general manager and the field manager, whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the people behind the scenes that you never see that make sure that you are having the best day, best experience. If the housekeepers were like, "Screw it, I'm not going to do this, not that important," you would feel it 100%. You would know it'd be terrible 100%. I mean, we went into one recently and they didn't change the sheets of the previous guest. And so you're like, who decided that I was willing to be giving a half-ass effort, right? I get it. Everybody's busy. But the thing about the housekeeper, nobody ever says thank you to them when they're walking down the hallway. You may say, "Hey, I'm out of my room." And we may look at them and say, maybe they don't speak English or whatever. And when I was in the pharmaceutical company industry, we had one of our medical directors send a note to everybody in our company. And I thought it was brilliant. We were at a big conference and the note was on our bed was, "Please be courteous to all the housekeepers. Many times they are physicians from other countries who have come to the United States for a better life." And this was in New York City, which was a little bit more prominent. And that was a pretty fascinating thing, because you're right. I remember there was a guy I worked with Merck when I was in Merck. This was a guy who was an OBGYN from Cuba. So he was a, prominent doctor in Cuba. He had escaped Cuba. And the reason was that as a physician, he was smuggling in antibiotics into the prisons so that the physicians that were imprisoned for voicing opposition to Fidel Castro were treating the prisoners. Okay. Total humanity, right? He had been tipped off that they were listening and following what he was doing. So he had the opportunity to go to a conference in Russia, and he didn't have the money to go. But the travel agent that he had to book it through said, you'll get your stipend when you return. But I'm booking you through Barcelona and then just change planes. And if you come back, just pay it back. And he said, how do I pay you? And he goes, and he kept kind of like wink, wink, like you need to leave. So when he got off the plane in Barcelona, he went right to the embassy and claimed asylum. He lived in Barcelona for 2 years trying to get his stuff squared and moved and relocated to Miami, Florida, where his uncle had also gotten out. Now his family, his wife, his kids were still in Cuba. So he had political asylum. But he worked as a car washer for 3 years. And, I think of the number of people who brought their cars in and probably looked down on him, didn't speak to him well, whatever. And I'm thinking, this was a guy who was a physician in his home country of Cuba who was funneling antibiotics in for the humane treatment of other prisoners. And people are acting like he's not worth the conversation. I think we have to look at everything we do in our world, not looking at what we think they are as status, but looking at who we are as people. That's what I saw from the young man picking up the trash. That's what I see of our housekeepers. That's what I see the people who are, coming in our country and they're working, and we look at them and say, oh, speak the language. Are you kidding me? I mean, I don't like the immigration policies we have in our country today. I wish everybody who came into this country had a worker ID and would pay taxes into our system, but that's not nor here nor there. But I think maybe we need to look at all that and say, we can all be better and treat each other with better respect. We're all trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you think about, when I think about the culture and the mindsets of a kid like that picking up the trash, or the housekeepers going the extra mile, or this guy fleeing and then working in a job that was below what his education level was and what he was used to. I want to know, when you look at a program like Alabama's football team and their consistency to be at an elite championship level, what in their culture sets them apart and makes them different, kind of like that young man, like these workers that are cleaning our rooms and dealing with garbage and doing these things? What goes on in an Alabama system that makes them so special year in, year out, and able to compete at such a high level?
Yeah, I think when you look at elite teams like Alabama or the program I played for at LSU, is that my coach and Coach Saban were very similar. They both won a lot of national titles in a short amount of time. One of the things that they both did was that every player on the team deserved their full coaching. It didn't matter if they were walk-ons. They didn't matter if they were the tackling dummy. They didn't matter. They all got coached the same. And there was something I learned watching Anthony Grant, who was the national coach of the year 2 years ago for Dayton, who used to be the basketball coach at Alabama. He would coach the walk-ons just as hard, the practice team players just as hard as the superstars. I think that's a really good key, but every player has their own developmental plan. And I think that's where most coaches fail, is that they don't have a specified plan for each player. Every player on that team wants to contribute in some way. I served as one of those walk-on guys or whatever for 2 years, 3 years. And there were a lot of times that I did things that other people didn't do and didn't want to do, but I knew my role because I was told what my role was. And for us to win, I had to pull my role. Like, I had to do my job. Coach Saban and all them, they're very big in that. And players will get uncomfortable and they'll want to leave and all that. But players that stick it out and say they trust the plan that they have laid out, and you do the things that are necessary for you to succeed, it tends to always work. Right. So those things are critical. I think the other facet is that those kind of coaches demand that there's something bigger than you if you buy into it, and they can sell the vision. A lot of coaches will say, trust the process, but the players don't know what the process is. a coach has never sat down and really told him. And I've had that parroted back to me a lot by players. Coach tells me to trust the process, trust the process, trust. I don't know what the hell the process is. And so, at coach with us at Bama, I mean, it's down to the littlest basics. Okay. If we go to Chick-fil-A, their process is down to how many napkins you get, how they greet you, how they look you in the eye, everything. Nothing is overlooked. And so it takes a lot of sacrifice and commitment, and it takes a lot of buy-in, and it's not right for everybody. Some people don't want to be held to those standards. And so go on, move on. That's fine. And there's always somebody that's going to follow you, and there's always somebody that's going to replace you. And as long as you realize that you're not the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, if you take a look at Alabama, never had a Heisman Trophy winner. Mark Ingram wins one. Then Derrick Henry wins one. Then Devontae Smith wins one. Now Bryce Young, right? All of a sudden now the bar continues to be raised, and they've shown what's capable of doing. So, but I can tell you, Derrick Henry wanted to probably leave. Devontae Smith was not the superstar wide receiver for several years. Bryce Young didn't get to play last year much at all. But here they are, they're all patient. So that now players look at that and say, well, if I trust what they do and I stick it out, I'm fine. I have a young player who is in his second or third year, and he hasn't really gotten to play a lot, but he knows that the player in front of him is just better than him. And he said, my people back home are all over me. Dude, you got to transfer. They're not giving you a chance. He goes, I can be patient. They don't understand that. Well, that's a player who buys into the system. He understands that it may be his third or fourth or fifth year before he ever sees the field consistently. Well, that's what you have to do sometimes. Not everybody gets to come in and play as a freshman. And sometimes freshmen beat out seniors, and sometimes 3-year starters get beat out by somebody else who got better. Every player has the right to improve. And as coaches, we have to have a plan to develop them, to give them that right.
Yeah, when you tell that story, I think of a guy like Jalen Hurts, who started, lost his job, stuck it out, graduated, then transferred, made a career of it. Now is in the NFL having success. Or you think about, the different situation where you said that guy's waiting 2-3 years. Well, at a school like Alabama, if you buy in and you wait, it may only take 1 year for you to get to the next level. Like if that's your goal and you want to play at the next level, buy in, get better, get pushed by somebody who's great. Because obviously if they're ahead of you at a school like that, they're probably pretty good.
Right.
Get better, grow. And then when your time comes, shine.
But not everybody wants to be told the truth either.
Yeah.
So a lot of us want to be told what we believe is the truth, but it is not the truth. The truth is you've got to do certain things to improve, and you're not going to play if you do these things. But so many athletes today have so many people in their corners telling them stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of those people that are telling them things don't always have their best interest at heart. They have their own interest at heart. So, for people will say that about coach, they'll be like, well, I mean, he doesn't really, all he wants to do is win. It's like, not really. Yes, he wants to win. He wants to develop people. So, if you're willing to do what it takes to get there, okay, we're better. We're better. I mean, I think it's a better chance, a better point of success.
Yeah.
So you just got to trust that. I mean, you got to trust the thing about coach is that he's got years and years and years of doing this.
Right. So to wind down here, last question for you is tell me a little bit about Suckville and what that project's about, and how do we break free?
Well, Suckville was written because of the number of players that come to see me, and 90% of people who come to see me are stuck. They're stuck, falling short. They're frustrated that they're falling short of their potential, right? But the fact is, we're never going to hit our potential. We're never going to hit our potential. What we're going to do is, when we're so anchored into our potential, we crap on our reality, and we don't see that what we're actually doing is a lot better than what we probably ever thought we were doing. And so Suckville is that space between our potential and our reality. And so what happens is we get conditioned to see things as struggling and bad and negative and not good and frustrating and all that other stuff. So what it takes is some changes in the way we think and the way we develop our process and the people we surround ourselves with, to realize that we're going to make our reality better every day. We're not going to try to anchor into this potential. Potential is a promise of hope that doesn't really exist, because you're never going to hit your potential, because every time you think you've hit it, you just move it up higher. So the book was written as a way to kind of say, look, this is what people come to see me for. And when they come to see me, these are things that we work on. And so here's a plan for that to help you. So that's what it's about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to leave an opportunity for my guests and listeners to get a hold of you, social media, website, whatever it may be?
Best way to get in touch with me is on social media. It's at Dr Bhrett McCabe. It's spelled BHRETT MCCABE. You can find me there. Hit me up. I answer all my own DMs. And if you got any questions about what we do, you can go to my website. It's brettmccabe.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Really greatly appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars, fall flat on your face. But remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.